What up there, Mikey Scrooge? Good friend Michael here, and we're talking about the NCAA tournament. And just to tell you, this is probably the absolute craziest tournament I have ever witnessed in my life. First off, congrats to UMBC becoming the first ever 16 seed to win a tournament game over a number one seed. Number one seeds coming into that game were 0-135. Well, technically they were 0-134 because Xavier was playing Texas Southern at the same time Virginia UMBC was going on. But by the time that game ended, they were 0-135. And here comes little-known UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, the Retrievers, who had to get in the tournament on a last-second shot to beat Vermont in the buzzer in the American East Championship game. And then earlier this season, they lost to Albany 83-39 in conference play. And to think that they just knocked off the number one overall seed, and by 20 points, it was incredible. Just a great game to watch. I turned the game on. I'm like, you know what? Let's see what a 16 seed can do. Because, even though it would ruin my bracket, I always want to, try to see, can history be made? Because it never been done before. It had been close before in '89 with Princeton and Georgetown. Oklahoma and East Tennessee State, it was close. Murray State took Michigan State to overtime. Western Carolina fell short against Purdue. UNC Asheville almost took down Syracuse. Southern tried to take down Gonzaga. Those are all the really close 1 versus 16 games. And, like I said, it'd be great to see history happen. Even if, if it ruined my bracket, I wouldn't really care. My bracket was pretty much already shot up at this point anyways by the time this game was going on. My predictions were way off this year, as I'm sure a lot of people's were as well. I don't think a lot of people saw this Sweet 16 coming right here. But, it was tied at 21 at the half, so you know what? I'm like, okay, I'll switch over to another game. I'll come back for the second half. And probably, I'm thinking at this point, you know what? Virginia's probably going to start dominating the second half. UMBC gave it a nice run as a 16 seed, but they're going to fall short. Well, then here comes the second half rolls around, and UMBC gets out to about a 10-point lead. And it's like, okay, well, they're out to a 10-point lead, but I've seen this before. I've seen Albany lead UConn by 10 through the second half, and then they ended up losing by, I think, close to 15, 20 points. So it's like, okay, well, let's see what happens here. As the game rolled on, the lead got bigger, got out to 14 points, and then Virginia was hitting shots maybe with about 10 minutes to go in the game, but UMBC was still hitting their shots as well. And then when UMBC hit a 3 to put them up 17 with under 4 minutes to go, I was like, that's it. We are going to witness history tonight. The first 16 seed is going to defeat a 1 seed for the first time ever in tournament history. And so, I stopped at that point trying to root for Virginia to try to have them win, although part of me was, like I said, rooting for UMBC just because it's like, history has never been made before. Let's see this thing happen. And I just sat back, soaked up the moment, and enjoyed every minute of that. And to say now we live in a world where a 16 seed has won in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Because it had happened in the women's tournament before. Harvard defeated Stanford back in 1998. So it had happened before. And coming actually into this tournament, it was being projected that maybe Penn would be the 16th seed to do it. They were maybe, quote, saying, there was an article quote that quoted it saying that Penn was the best 16 seed ever coming in. I think they'd only lost 8 games. They're an Ivy League team. An Ivy League team usually doesn't get a 16 seed on the men's side. And Ivy League teams are always pretty scrappy, hard to deal with in the tournament. And Penn was up by 10 points over Kansas in the first half of this game. And they battled. They were within 4 at one point in the second half before Kansas ended up pulling away and winning that game. But no one's talking about UMBC being that first 16 seed to win. And Texas Southern, they fell quite short, and so did Radford against Villanova. But UMBC will go down in history as the first ever 16 seed to win. I was rooting for them last night against Kansas State as well. And unfortunately, UMBC could not take the lead in the second half. They had a lead in the first half, fell down by 5 at halftime. They were within 1 to 3 points for most of the second half before Kansas State got up by 5 late in the game, like with under a minute to go, then made it 7. And at that point, we all realized it was over. Of course, well, I was very upset at Kansas State for winning at that point, as I'm sure a lot of America was, except for probably Kansas State fans and maybe even some Virginia fans as well, for ruining such a great story. Kind of like how I felt when Stuart Sink beat Tom Watson at the 2005 Open Championship. Hey, dude, you ruined a great story. Good job. Kind of the exact same feeling. But you know what? UMBC can, they didn't have a letdown after that game. They came and they battled, and if they could have hit some timely shots in that game, they could have easily been in the Sweet 16 taking on Kentucky. Now, if they had been able to take on Kentucky, that would have been quite a feat as well. But, I mean, hats off to them still, obviously, for making history. No one will ever forget that, this was the first time ever that a 16 seed took down a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And not just any number 1 seed, the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. So, what an amazing feat. What an amazing accomplishment. And history has been made, and we'll never, ever look at the brackets the same again when we fill it out. In fact, I doubt we will any year, as this year has proven. So, I just wanted to talk about that game really quickly. We'll move on now. We're going to recap the scores for the first 2 rounds of the tournament. We'll start with the Thursday games for the first round, and then the Friday, and then we'll go into the second round for the Saturday and Sunday games. I'll try to predict what could happen here in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 leading up to the Final 4, which will be set by this coming Sunday night. If anything has been proven, my prediction has been horribly wrong all tournament long, so they're probably not going to be right again. So let's start off talking about Michigan. They defeated Montana 61-47 on Thursday, and it was anything but pretty as Michigan fell behind 10-0 early to Montana. And I'm thinking, geez, are they going to get beat by a 14 seed in the tournament? Well, their defense was able to hold Montana to 19 second-half points, so Michigan was able to pull away in this game, but it did not look pretty at all. Radford, they demolished, Villanova, they demolished Radford. It was 87-61. It was 44-23 at halftime, and by then the rout was definitely on. Kansas, they defeated 16-seeded Penn 76-60, and like I said, Penn was up by 10 in this game, and they were within 4 points in the second half at one point, but they just could not get any closer and pull the gigantic upset before UMBC did. Gonzaga, they held on. They defeated UNC Greensboro 68-64. Gonzaga missed some free throws down the stretch. UNC Greensboro had a chance to tie with a three-pointer late, and how the shot did not go down was any guess you can. I don't know how. Guess it any way you like. I don't know how the three-pointer shot did not go down. Gonzaga made one of their last 2 free throws to secure the victory in that one. Duke had no problem with Iona winning 89-67. How about Buffalo? They took down the Pac-12 champion Arizona 89-68. And this is the first time in NCAA history, by the way, that a major conference school did not send a team to the round of 32. UCLA, Arizona State were eliminated in the first 4. Arizona was eliminated in the first round of the tournament. It wasn't even close as Buffalo manhandled them. Great win for the Mid-American Conference, by the way. This was an upset I did not see coming. However, I guess I probably should have, just because of the fact the Pac-12 was very, very weak this year. And, that's who Arizona ended up getting a lot of their wins against, was just crummy Pac-12 opponents. And Arizona was a team coming to the tournament. Everyone was saying, well, they're rallying around each other, they're pulling things together. Look out for them. They could be dangerous in the tournament and, be a Final Four pick, even a national champion pick. And they ended up falling flat on their face in the first round. So congrats to Buffalo for an amazing win over Arizona. And when I usually predict these games, there's always one upset I don't see. There was multiple upsets this year. The UMBC one, Buffalo, Marshall over over Wichita State, another upset I didn't see coming. So this tournament's been full of upsets. Tennessee, they easily handled Wright State 73-47. Texas Tech, they were behind at halftime with number 14 seed Stephen F. Austin 70-60. Stephen F. Austin's a team I'm always pretty pretty hot about just because of I don't know. I think it's because of the fact they've been in the tournament so many times in recent years. They won as a 12 seed over VCU. They won as a 14 seed against West Virginia. They almost ended up going to the Sweet 16 as well if it wasn't for a tip-in against Notre Dame that same season. And I was thinking coming to this game, Texas Tech has not been playing very well. Stephen F. Austin is a team that could shock them. And for a while, it looked like it was going to happen, but Texas Tech pulled away and won. So that was, I definitely wrote Stephen F. Austin down in one of my brackets because I do too. I know that's kind of cheating, but whatever. But Texas Tech ended up pulling it out in the end. This was another one, South Dakota State against Ohio State, a team. Ohio State hadn't been in the tournament in a few years. South Dakota State had been there quite frequently recently, and they were pretty close as well. They were tied late into the game, but then they committed a foul on a three-point shot that Ohio State hit. They ended up getting a 4-point play out of it, and then they ended up making some free throws later down the stretch, and South Dakota State never was close after that. Again, they fell 81-73. Another one that could have been an upset pick, Kentucky against Davidson. Davidson brought it right down the wire. They've been a hot team going to the tournament where Kentucky had been hot as well, but they've been that kind of team like, which Kentucky team is going to show up this year? The one that we had at the beginning of the season that was doing well, and the one here at the end that's doing well, or the one in the middle of the season that was completely trash? Well, the one that was pretty good showed up as they beat Davidson 78-73. Houston, they starved off an upset. They beat San Diego State 67-65. Rob Gray had 39 points in that game, by the way, for Houston. He was a one-man wrecking crew as San Diego State almost overcame a 10-point deficit in that game. Loyola-Chicago, first round against Miami. This was an upset pick I absolutely nailed. One of the few I did. As they took down Miami 64-62. They hit Dante Ingram hit a three-pointer, which was almost at the buzzer. There was like 0.3 of a second left after he had made it. They had to go back and check the clock. But they were down by one coming down to this point, and I'm screaming, take it to the basket, take it to the basket. And I really have no voice because I was getting over a cold. And he puts up the three, and I'm just like, no, why? Why are you trying to be the hero? Then it goes in, and I'm screaming, yes, it worked. And Loyola-Chicago wins, and it's just an amazing story. They win this one, then they win it with basically almost a shot within the last 10 seconds against Tennessee, which we'll talk about that game a little bit later too. They have Sister Jean, who's the chaplain of the team, 98 years young, I will say. Sister Jean, she after the first round was asked about the team of Loyola that won in the 60s, won the NCAA National Championship, and she said that this team reminds her of that team. They share the ball well. They don't care who gets the points. They play as a team, and that's what matters. And Loyola hadn't been in the tournament since the 1980s. So what an incredible run. And you know what? They get to play a 7th seed in Nevada now. They have a good chance to maybe win that game and play Kentucky or Kansas State and maybe pull off the ultimate thing and get to the Final Four. Now, I'll tell you what. George Mason was an 11th seed when they went to the Final Four. Here, let's just do a little bit of comparison here. They ran through Michigan State, North Carolina, Wichita State, and UConn to get there. So they had to face a 6 seed, a 3 seed. They faced a 7 seed as well, but then they faced number 1 seed. All right, so here's a little comparison. That George Mason team was led by Jim Larinaga. Loyola-Chicago, as an 11 seed, took out Jim Larinaga as a 6 seed. It's almost the reverse here. Jim Larinaga, goes out in the first round as a 6 seed, losing to a Cinderella story possibly here as an 11 seed. They beat a 3 seed. Now they get to face a 7 seed. Now, they wouldn't obviously face number 1 seed, but Kentucky might as well be a number 1 seed in that region at this point. They have a good shot to get to the Final Four, and I'll be rooting for Loyola of Chicago the rest of the way. All right, moving on. In overtime, Rhode Island, they defeated Oklahoma 83-78. Trae Young, 28 points in the game. He gave it his all, but Rhode Island, ended up coming out on top. They were hot at the end of the year, and Oklahoma just simply was not. Seton Hall, they defeated NC State 94-83. There were over 50 combined fouls in that game. That was such a slow-moving game. Alabama over Virginia Tech 86-83 as Colin Sexton led the way for the Crimson Tide with 25 points. And then Florida, they easily handled St. Bonaventure after a close first half, 77-62. So those were all of the first-round Thursday games. Let's talk about the Friday games now. We already talked about UMBC. They took down Virginia 74-54. Jarius Lyles was the hero of that game with 28 points. And really, UMBC hitting all of their shots almost in this game, you know, reminds me of watching the highlights, because I wasn't around when this happened, but when Villanova, as an 8 seed, won the national championship over Georgetown, they did all the right things in this game. They hit 70% of their shots in this game. Now, UMBC's percentage was not 70% in this game, but it seemed to be they hit most of the shots when they needed to hit them, and played really good defense against Virginia. And Villanova in that game against Georgetown just hit 70% of their shots. You know, they did the right things to get them to victory, just the way UMBC did. Xavier, they took down Texas Southern 102-83. That was a high-scoring 1-16 game. Michigan State beat Bucknell 82-78. Now that score is a little closer than what the game actually was. Bucknell nailed quite a few threes in the final minute, so thankfully State made some free throws in that game, or else Bucknell could have pulled the upset. Cincinnati, they defeated Georgia State 68-53. Georgia State actually had the lead in this game in the second half. It's not surprising, really. You know, even though Cincinnati was a 2 seed, not that surprising just because of the fact Georgia State is a 14 seed a few years ago. Remember when Ron Hunter had to sit in a chair to coach the game? And then he fell out of his chair because his son, Ron Hunter Jr., hits a 3 to beat Baylor. So it's not surprising Georgia State came into this game with a, you know, and led in this game against Cincinnati late. Number 2 seeded North Carolina, they dismantled Lipscomb 84-66. Number 2 seed Purdue dismantled Cal State Fullerton 74-48. Isaac Haas was lost in this game for the rest of the tournament. He fractured his elbow. So we'll see what Purdue can do. They did end up defeating Butler yesterday in the NCAA tournament, on Sunday, I should say. So we'll see what Purdue can do the rest of the way. West Virginia, they easily handled Murray State, number 12 seeded Murray State, 85-68. Number 13 seeded Marshall over Wichita State, 81-75. Marshall, first time they've been in the tournament in 31 years, and they win their opening round game. An upset that my mom actually called. And it's funny because I laughed at my mom saying, "Oh, what are you doing picking Marshall?" She always picks one upset that's kind of out there that, you know, maybe no one is thinking about. I laughed at her about that. Look what it got me. A couple of years ago, she picks Hawaii over Cal. Same thing. I'm laughing at her. Look what it got me. So maybe I should listen to my mom when it comes to upsets as well from now on. Charleston, they just fell short as the 13th seed against number 4 Auburn, 62-58. Number 5 Clemson over New Mexico State. This was a trendy upset pick. Everyone was picking New Mexico State, it seemed like, including myself, but they fell short, losing to Clemson 79-68. How about Nevada? They had a huge comeback against Cincinnati, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But they had to make a comeback in this game against Texas in the first round. They were down 9 at the half to Texas, came back and won 87-83. In fact, I think they fell even farther behind to start the second half before they won in overtime. Texas A&M holds on. They defeat Providence 73-69. Butler, they defeat Arkansas 79-62. In fact, Butler got 21-2 in this game before Arkansas came all the way back, took the lead, but eventually lost by quite a bit in this game. They ended up losing by 17. Kansas State, they took down Creighton 69-59. Florida State, they defeated Missouri 67-54. Michael Porter Jr., not much of a factor in this one, really. He hadn't had the conditioning or anything going on, so just Missouri just couldn't get it together without him being in 100% full shape for that game. And Syracuse, as the 11th seed, pulls the upset over TCU 57-52. They were the last team in the field, and they are now in the Sweet 16 because we'll talk about their win over Michigan State coming up as well. So once again, here we are. We have a 16 seed that wins this year, 2 13 seeds. You have a 10 seed that won. You had 2 11 seeds that won, but you had no 12 seeds once again, and that's always been the trendy upset picker, these 12 seeds. What are the 12-5 matchups? And once again, we didn't have. Now, we were close in definitely 2 of them. Davidson, Kentucky, South Dakota State, Ohio State. The New Mexico State Clemson one was really never that close. And then the other one, Murray State, West Virginia, wasn't really close at all. So let's talk about Saturday night's games. First off, let's talk about Michigan against Houston. Now, as I'm watching this game, it's a scrappy game going back and forth. Michigan, once again, is not playing very well in this game. They're not shooting it well. Defense isn't bad, but they're not shooting the ball well at all in this game. And, just looking at the game coming down the stretch, I'm like, boy, I don't think Michigan's going to win this one. They're not hitting the shots when they need to. And when it got to be within the final minute, they continued to not be able to hit the shot to take the lead or to tie it. And Houston sent one of their, they got foul shots they have to make, and one of the guys that was heading the line had missed a shot all game. But his free throw percentage was in the 60% area, I believe. 65, 70%. And I'm thinking, this guy's due to miss at some point here. And he missed one, he made one. This meant Michigan had to go down and tie it. They can't do it. So the guy gets fouled. Houston's starting to think, this is ours, we've got this. The guy misses 2 free throws. Houston puts nobody in there, by the way, to even battle for the rebound. So Wagner gets the rebound. He calls a timeout. So Michigan has one last chance with about 3.5 seconds to go. They inbound it to Muhammad Ali Abdul-Rahman, who dribbles it across half court, gives it to Jordan Poole, who throws it up from 30 feet, and he makes the shot! Oh my gosh, it was incredible. I'm screaming yes, running around my living room, just celebrating, thinking a few seconds beforehand, Michigan is going to be out in the round of 32, and here they are going to the Sweet 16 for the 2nd straight year. Oh my gosh, it was such an amazing feeling. I do definitely feel bad for Houston, maybe just a little bit, I should say, losing at the buzzer like that. They were definitely a team I thought was a dark horse pick in this region. And it could have been a Houston-Texas A&M matchup going into the Sweet 16. You could have had a 6 or a 7 seed having a chance to go to the Final Four really after that. But Michigan wins, and we'll see what they can do against Texas A&M, which is going to be a very tough matchup. So we'll talk about that. Villanova, they defeated Alabama 81-58. Gonzaga, they held on to take down Ohio State 90-84 in a high-scoring affair. Florida had a couple of chances to tie Texas Tech in the last seconds, could not do it. Texas Tech won 69-66. Duke, they took that Rhode Island, no problem, 87-62. Kentucky defeats Buffalo by 20, 95-75. Loyola-Chicago, once again, they win nearly in the last few seconds as they make one last shot to get them to victory over Tennessee 63-62, and Kansas holds on to defeat Seton Hall 83-79. So those are Saturday's games. Now let's go to Sunday's games, which were absolutely insane. This was like the day nothing went right for anybody's bracket, it seemed like. Florida State come from behind victory over number 1 seeded Xavier 75-70. In fact, if you remember last year, Florida was a 3 seed taking on 11 seeded Xavier, and Xavier was the one that won and went all the way to the Elite 8. This time it's Florida State getting their revenge, and I'm thinking during this game, in my head before, if I were to pick this, I would pick Florida State. If I could go back and re-pick after each round, I was thinking Florida State. I would pick them to win this game, and they won. Syracuse, they defeated Michigan State 55-53. Michigan State just could not hit a shot in this game. In the last 10 minutes, they could not hit a shot. All they needed was one shot, either to tie it or to take the lead here in the final seconds, and they could not do it. And I had Michigan State picked to go pretty far in the tournament. I'm sure a lot of people did. Syracuse, once again, surprises people. I mean, they did as a 10 seed, they went all the way to the Final Four. Can they do it as an 11 seed? They run into ACC foe Duke, so Duke is definitely familiar with Syracuse. I feel like Duke's going to definitely win that one. There's a prediction already for the next round. But Michigan State had a chance, actually. And the Syracuse zone, it is very tough. The 2-3 zone, Jim Boeheim does a really good job coaching it. It is tough to penetrate. But Michigan State had a shot, actually. I think it was Ben Carter caught a ball right in the middle of the zone, the weak spot of the zone, about 10 feet away from the basket. And instead of going up with it, he passed the ball off. It's like, if you're Ben Carter, you got to put that up. And I don't know why he didn't do it. And it would have given Michigan State a chance to actually tie that game and maybe send the game to overtime, but it did not happen. Now, let's talk about this next game. Nevada against Cincinnati. Nevada, they went on a 32-8 run in this game. 32-8 run late in this game. Nevada was down by 22 points. I thought, no need to tune into that one. And I jokingly, or I made a joke, before the comeback even happened. I'm like, oh, look, Nevada pulled to within 4 points. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm just kidding. Cincinnati's still up by 20. And then the next thing I look at the TV, I'm like, oh, my gosh, Nevada's only down 5. And then it's tied. We turn it on. We flip it on to that game. And Nevada takes the lead, and Cincinnati can't get a shot off to tie it up. Mick Cronin and his team's got to be thinking, what in the world just happened? And Nevada had to make 2 huge comebacks to get to this point. What an incredible job by the Wolfpack to win that game. And then talk about dismantling a team. Texas A&M, number 7 seed, they dismantled number 2 North Carolina, 86-65. That game was not even close. Oh, my goodness. The battle for West Virginia, by the way. West Virginia against Marshall. What a matchup, a rivalry matchup there. Great for the state of West Virginia. West Virginia prevailed, though, pretty easily, 94-71. Clemson, they dismantled Auburn, 84-53. I think Auburn forgot that they even had a game yesterday. Purdue, they barely scraped by Butler, 76-73 in the battle for Indiana, as you would say. And then the last game, Kansas State over UMBC, 50-43. Once again, what a great job by UMBC to become the first 16 seed ever to win. And they were battling hard to get to the Sweet 16. It would have been amazing if they had been able to get there, but unfortunately, they just fell a few points short of that mark. So now let's preview the Sweet 16. So in the South region, you have no top 4 seeds remaining, and this is the first time ever in NCAA history, no top 4 seeds remain in one region of the bracket. You also have 2 9 seeds in the Sweet 16 for the first time ever as well. So you got Kansas State versus Kentucky, and I'm telling you, Kansas State against UMBC could not hit anything, it seemed like. I feel like Kentucky, like I said, they've rounded themselves into form, and they're fortunate, I think, to be playing the teams they are right now. Now, Davidson, of course, their first-round matchup was a really tough matchup. Buffalo, maybe people were thinking the way they played against Arizona, Buffalo could do something against Kentucky. They couldn't. Now they get to take on a Kansas State team who's not that great, to tell you the truth. Kansas State's probably the weakest team left in the Sweet 16, and I'm predicting Kentucky goes to the Elite 8. Now, the other matchup, Loyola-Chicago against Nevada, how many of you had that in your bracket picked for this matchup? The way Loyola is playing, they are playing really tough, really gritty, making these last-second shots. Nevada, however, is making these huge comebacks. So you got the team that's winning at the last second versus the team that's having the huge comeback victories. Now, can that wear out a team? Absolutely, but Nevada has a week to rest up for this game. However, I am going to go with Loyola-Chicago. The Cinderella run, I have a gut feeling this team is going to beat Nevada, go to the Elite 8 against Kentucky. And you know what? Even though Kentucky's playing very well at this point, and Loyola, I know, is probably going to be a huge underdog if they get the chance to play Kentucky, I am going with Loyola-Chicago to come out of the South region. I mean, the way this tournament is going, can you not see something like this happening? I mean, you must think at some point this tournament has to stabilize itself, but where? Where would you even pick this tournament to be stable, except for maybe the East region is the only really stable region in this tournament, as they have the 1, 2, 3, and 5 seeds left. So I'm going to go with Loyola-Chicago to come out of the South region of this of the bracket. Now going out west, Florida State and Gonzaga, Michigan against Texas A&M. Gonzaga, obviously, they've had to have 2 really close games, whereas Florida State, they pretty much handled Missouri and had a great comeback win against Xavier. Now, Florida State could easily make it here. You could have Florida State against Texas A&M. I could easily see that with a trip to the Final Four in the line for those 2 teams. Now, I'm going to go with Gonzaga in this matchup to beat Florida State just because of Killian Tilly and the rest of the Gonzaga team. I think after last year, them getting the national championship game, falling just a little bit short, even though they lost some great players in this team, Gonzaga is a team in the tournament that's been, for many years, has been a team that's done very well in the tournament very often. And I think that trend will continue here. They will go to the Elite Eight. As much as I'd love to pick Michigan over Texas A&M, the way Michigan's played in their first 2 rounds, that hasn't got me very confident about them. Even after a buzzer beater, I'm not very confident with that they can beat Texas A&M. They beat a pretty good Providence team, and they rolled North Carolina. I mean, absolutely rolled them. I think Texas A&M is the team that's going to go to the Elite Eight against Gonzaga. And after that, I am picking Texas A&M. They're on a roll right now. I think they end up in the Final Four against Loyola-Chicago. George H.W. Bush, President 41, picked Texas A&M to win this entire tournament. Obviously, I believe he's a Texas A&M alum. And Barack Obama picked Michigan State. And, and obviously after they both shared their brackets, Obama commented saying, I got to give you credit going with, A&M, the school you went to. That wasn't the exact quote, but something along those lines. It's not impossible. Texas A&M could easily end up, well, I shouldn't say easily, but could end up in the national championship game. If they play Loyola-Chicago, and let's say they do, and they beat Loyola, you could have A&M in the national championship game. It's not out of the realm of possibility. So I'm going with Loyola against A&M on the left side of the bracket. Let's go over the right side, where it's almost a little bit more stable, minus Syracuse being the only really low-seeded team over here. So Villanova against West Virginia, you've got the press of West Virginia. Very hard to prepare for. However, Villanova, they get a week to prepare for this thing. And because of that fact, I'm going to go with Villanova to get to the Elite Eight in the East region, playing in Boston. In the other game, you've got Texas Tech against Purdue. Purdue without Isaac Haas. They did win yesterday against Butler. But I think, none of these teams really do that well in the tournament, to tell you the truth. Texas Tech, it's been a long time since they've been here. Purdue seems to bow out pretty early. I'm going to go with Texas Tech. Without Isaac Haas, I think Texas Tech and their guard play is going to be able to do some damage against Purdue. I'm going to pit Texas Tech against Villanova in the East Regional Final, with Villanova and all the talent they have winning the matchup to go to the Final Four. So 1 seed will be in the Final Four, I will say that. And then on the other side, Kansas against Clemson. Kansas struggled against Penn, barely held on against Seton Hall. Clemson pretty much handled New Mexico State, and they put a butt whooping on Auburn. I'm actually going to go with Clemson in the upset here over Kansas. I don't think Kansas makes it out of the Sweet 16. I think Clemson, they're playing really hot basketball right now, and I'm going to pick Clemson to win that game. And in the other game, I'm going to go with Duke over Syracuse. I think, it's a familiar matchup, an ACC matchup, and I think it's just the wrong matchup Syracuse needed. If they end up playing Rhode Island in this game, I would definitely say Syracuse moves on. But with it being a familiar matchup for Duke, I think Duke ends up moving on here. And I think with the Duke-Clemson matchup, another familiar matchup, Duke is a stronger opponent. I think Duke gets to the Final Four. So my prediction is you're gonna have an 11 seed, a 7 seed, a 1 seed, and a 2 seed in the Final Four. Now I will not predict who would obviously go to the championship game and win, and go to the championship game and end up winning, because at this point, I mean, that prediction could easily be wrong, obviously, and those teams could easily be wrong. But I'm penciling in Loyola-Chicago, Texas A&M, Villanova, and Duke. Now, hopefully I'm wrong about A&M because I'd love to see Michigan win, but that's just my prediction. All right, so how's your bracket doing? What teams do you have left? Do you have any chance at having a good bracket left? Is your winner still available? Comment in the comment section below. Also, what are your predictions for the upcoming Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games this coming weekend? You can post those comments in the comment section below, too. I want to thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more content. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, by the way. Links are in the description below. Until next time, this is Michael Alvin. Over and out. Mikey's Crew guys are the best. Take care.